If you're only getting 10 people to sign up, man, it doesn't really move the needle that much. I just had a client who we did a webinar earlier today, and about a third of their webinar signups came from this method. It was that kind of old way versus new way that ended up creating the 5 to 10x result in my webinar conversion rate.
The Next Gen Sales Leaders Podcast. Coffees for Closers.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Next Gen Sales Leader Podcast. My name is Benjamin Reed. I'm here with Logan Lyles. He is the founder of DemandShift. He focuses on generating leads and demand through webinars for B2B companies. Welcome to the show.
Hey, Ben. Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.
So you're the first person I've really talked to deeply about webinars. And, obviously people that listen to this call know that I'm interested in lead generation, B2B, sales operations, sales process. And so obviously webinars is a piece of that overall puzzle, but would love to kind of get a quick background of why webinars, why should people care, and why do you do what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So for any marketers listening to this show and any salespeople, I just want to say, I'm with you both. I've been on both sides of the fence, both brand side and agency side. I've been on the marketing side of the fence and the sales side of the fence. And one of my greatest flops, I would say, in my career was in this area of webinars that the salespeople listening can probably empathize with. You know, webinars have been around for B2B brands on the marketing side as a way to drive brand awareness, but typically seen as an effective lead gen strategy. And I know that the salespeople listening to this may say, yeah, but we don't see a lot of leads from marketing when they run webinars, or we get leads, but they're crap, that sort of thing. And unfortunately, I was guilty of the former of that. So for 2 years, I ran a monthly webinar series for a B2B SaaS brand when I was an in-house marketer, and it was great brand building. We actually saw people, lots of engagement, high attendance rates, people coming to multiple sessions. So we knew that the content was good. But when I looked at the direct attribution to pipeline, was there some maybe kind of loosely attributable? Yes. But when I looked at that, I was really disappointed with the results of what I was delivering to our sales team. And so after that stop in my career, I went back agency side and I decided to try and fix what I call this dead end webinar playbook that a lot of B2B brands are running. And I made some tweaks to my registration flow, to the way that I promote it, to the conversion path that I gave people during the live show, all the way down to how we repurposed and used the content. And I ended up 5Xing my results. When I looked at webinar registration, conversion rate to booked sales call, I went from a 1 to 2% conversion rate there to a 10+% conversion rate. And it was through that aha moment of, hey, if this worked for me and I took our webinars up to the second highest performing channel for new business for our agency, I could probably help some other B2B brands with it as well. So as of summer of last year, I've been helping B2B agencies and B2B brands install what we call the Webinar Fast Track Framework, which is my 5-part framework that I developed, trying to get out of running the same old dead-end playbook that I was guilty of. And I know a lot of people listening to this, if they were looking at their results, they might be feeling a lot like I was several years ago.
So for anybody listening, I'm not a webinar guy. Yeah. And this kind of goes to show that there's so many different ways to generate demand. Mm-hmm. And this is one potential funnel. For anybody who's like brand new to the webinar world, everyone knows what a webinar is, but what would you say was the old way of doing it that you were just referred to, and how do you define your new way? Could you give me the old versus new example for anyone listening? This is a break in the podcast to bring you our sponsor, ReadyOps.com. That is REVYOPS.com, the #1 GTM data management platform for your GTM and revenue operations data on planet Earth. If you are using the modern stack of Clay and Instantly and Email Bison and RB2B and Trigify and all these various tools scattered across the wind, we unify all that data all into one place so you don't have any duplication kids a unified view of every single contact so you can see all the data and all the activities across all the platforms all in one place. It will allow you and your team to move faster, to get better attribution across the entire funnel, and to make a heck of a lot more money. Go to reviops.com, check out how you can get started today with me on a call where we'll learn about your data management problems and how we can get you guys to the next level of growth. See you guys at reviops.com. Go there now. It will be in the show notes as well down below. Let's get back to the podcast.
Yeah, there's a few components to it. So when I think about the 5-part framework that we use, part 1 is promotion tactics that actually work. Number 2 is a 2-step sign-up process that separates your hot from your cold leads. The 3rd's a high-value live show. 4th is actually segmenting your audience for more personalized and prioritized follow-up. And then 5th is repurposing and amplifying. So I think there's kind of an old and new way in each of those sections, right? So the first, in promotion tactics, I think the old way is, hey, we promote webinars on organic social and we send emails to our list. And that's got a lot of B2B brands just kind of stuck in what I call the registration rut. And, it makes sense because if you're just relying on organic social, a lot of B2B marketers listening to this will say, yeah, organic LinkedIn is way tougher sledding than it was 5 years ago. And so that was tough originally, and now it's even tougher now. And if we're emailing our list, man, we're not really reaching net new audiences. We're not getting more into the top of the funnel. So that's kind of the old way there. With the sign up process, part 2 in the framework, I think the old way of doing it is what I call a dead end thank you page. So I've surveyed 250 B2B marketing teams, and across those, the data really showed the same thing that I've seen in the last few years. Attendance rates for webinars hover in the 35% range, even if you're doing well. Like if you're doing really well, you could get that maybe up to 50%, something like that. But you know what people are seeing nearly 100% of the time is your thank you message upon registration. And so this was the unlock, without kind of going into the old and new way of each part of it. This piece right here, if nothing else we talk about and people take from this episode, it will be this idea of this 2-step sign up process. Because what I said was, okay, if I'm only getting 35% of people to a webinar, even if it's educational and it's not just a pitch or a demo, it's educational, you still should have some sort of call to action of like, hey, if this content was helpful, you want us to help you further, here's our service, here's our product, here's how it could help even further. Well, instead of only getting that call to action in front of 35% of your audience, what if you had a way to filter the in-market leads to that call to action right at the moment of sign up? Because like I said, 100% of people are seeing the thank you message after they register. So I saw that as a huge missed opportunity. So I replaced that dead end thank you page with a survey that asks some qualifying questions, some pain, agitation, discovery questions, and then ended with a call to action of, would you like to book a call with the team that specializes in XYZ? Or would you, whatever that next step was. And it was that kind of old way versus new way in the sign up process that ended up creating the 5 to 10x result in my webinar conversion rate that I mentioned earlier.
And so by putting the essential discovery question survey at the front end, you are able to capture people that may not show up, but also kind of subliminally preempts people to expect additional follow-up, even if they do show up, right? Is that fair?
Yeah. And as I mentioned, like step 4 in the framework is segmented and prioritized follow-up. So what I've seen is that by putting this survey right behind your registration form and replacing the thank you page with this survey, it increases the odds that you get that CTA in front of more people. It increases your conversion rate, but it also primes them for the follow-up, and it preps you for the follow-up, because even the people who say no to that final question, to booking a call, starting a trial, whatever your CTA is, they've usually answered 6 to 8 questions in this survey is typically what we shoot for. And now you have first party real time answers and data to personalize, segment, and prioritize your follow-up. And so not only are they primed for that sort of follow-up, but you can do better follow-up that's actually more relevant based on the questions that they answered in this survey.
So I'm going to just do a quick mic check because I want to make sure that my my stuff is actually coming through. Bear with me for 1 second while I triple check. Okay, it seems like we are good here. So, okay, so just to keep rolling. So now, in terms of the questions, you said pain, agitation, and you also said some qualifying questions. Is there a formula for that? Is it different by client, or is there like a standard process you guys use and it just crushes?
Yeah, so I would say it's fairly standardized, and then with the customization per client. So it usually follows a pretty standard formula. So like I said, I guess the first thing on the checklist, if you're thinking about implementing this sort of survey, is one, the way you present it matters. So as I said, the survey, what we do is we replace the thank you page with the survey. So it's not a survey that you send to them via email afterwards or something like that. It is upon filling out the registration form, it's an immediate redirect. And pro tip here is if you make the language there of the survey feel like a continuation of the registration process, then you can see survey completion rates as high as 90%. I've had clients who come to me and say, Logan, I don't think people are going to do that. And time again, I actually had a client, a B2B SaaS client, who kind of questioned that 90%. And after the first webinar we ran together, theirs was 89.5%. I was like, well, I was off by 0.5%, but hopefully you guys believe me now because that was pretty good benchmarking there. So that's the first part in setting it up. The next thing is start with easy questions. So for instance, the first question on pretty much every client survey is just, where are you located? And just North America, South America, Europe, and so on. So it's a really easy question for them to answer. Followed up by that might be industry, something like that. So start with easy questions to answer, but make sure that any of the questions that you're asking are things that are actually valuable for you to know. Right. And so the easy questions and the qualification questions can kind of overlap in this first part of the survey. The second thing I would say is you probably don't want to have more than about 8 questions total, including your final CTA question that is going to allow them to convert during the sign up process. The pain, agitation, or the discovery questions is probably where there is the most nuance per client, right? You kind of want to lead into those in kind of the second phase of the survey. And if you have the time and the capabilities and the right survey tool that you can use here, building some logic into that to personalize kind of the last third of the survey can really increase your conversion rates. For instance, when I first started running this 2-step sign-up process, I was working for an agency running sales and marketing, and we had a lot of services. We weren't kind of a niche specialized agency like I have here at DemandShift now. We did messaging, we did website design, we did paid social media, a lot of different services. So one of the questions I would ask would be, which of these areas is kind of your biggest challenge area in marketing right now? And based on what they said, the next question would be a little bit different. And then the final CTA, instead of just saying, hey, would you like to book a call with a marketing agency that helps companies grow? It would say, if they said their biggest challenge was LinkedIn ads, I would say, would you like to book a call with a team that specializes in getting 3x ROI or 3 times lower CPL on their LinkedIn ads campaign, right? And so those are kind of the 3 sections: the easy to answer qualification questions, the discovery questions, and then framing the final CTA. That's kind of the formula, but then there's a good bit of nuance within that.
Got it. And then so people go to the registration page, redirect automatically to this continuation page. And then from there, they go through that structure of questions you said, and they submit. What happens next?
Yeah, great question. So if they say yes to that final CTA question, we do another redirect. And most often, most of our clients are in B2B, either some sort of software or some sort of service. So it's a higher consideration purchase. So we're not redirecting them to buy now, or usually even to just start a trial of something. Although you could do that if you had a lower cost item, or you kind of have a PLG, focused motion where it's a free trial you have a freemium pricing model or something like that. Mm-hmm. But if you're selling high consideration B2B, it's typically some sort of consulting strategy or sales call or something that's kind of a mixture thereof. So if they say yes to scheduling that call, you want to immediately redirect them to a calendar booking page, right? And so you could use Calendly, you could use something that's built into your CRM and marketing automation like I do with High Level. I know other folks do this with HubSpot, and then give them the opportunity to book the call right then and there. If they say no, then you can display a kind of standard thank you message and say, hey, thanks for registering. Looking forward to seeing you on the webinar. Check your inbox for the calendar invite and that sort of stuff. You also have an opportunity there to not necessarily have them hit a dead end, right? If they say no, you could have that thank you message, but then you could have other content related to it and say, hey, if thanks for registering for the webinar, here's something else that might help. If you have some sort of downsell offer, or you have some other content offer, and you could just kind of go on and see, as Morpheus says, how deep the rabbit hole can go. To take a 1999 Matrix reference into 2026 B2B sales. But
it's my favorite movie.
But that's kind of the thinking. Once you get out of this mindset of where do I have dead ends with my webinar or any sort of content offer or lead magnet, your wheels just start turning of how much you could build into this.
So they're now registered. They've gone through the flow. I assume you've now segmented the responses into certain lists in your CRM, or your autoresponder, active campaign, whatever you're using. Tell me about how people, the mechanism of getting people to the registration page. Because you said that historically it's been organic, and now it sounds like you're doing some type of demand gen. Yep. Like paid ads. Tell me about that. Timing, channels, messaging, because I think that's where most people probably are like, okay, I have this webinar, I'm going to host people, but how do I even get them there?
Yeah, right. I mean, it's great if we could take your conversion rate from 1% to 10%, but if you're only getting 10 people to sign up, man, it doesn't really move the needle that much, right? And so in the data, and maybe we could link to this in the show notes, that we have the state of B2B webinar lead generation. We're releasing a report here soon, and people can join the waitlist and get access. But one of the things that we noticed was that B2B brands are struggling with two problems. One is the conversion cliff. If they're getting enough people registered, they don't have a strong CTA during the live show. Practically no one has this kind of two-step funnel on the front end during registration that we've been talking about. But the other thing that they're struggling with is what we call the registration rut, which is going back to, your question here of how do they get out of that? Okay, we post on LinkedIn. Maybe we rally the team to post a few more times on LinkedIn, and we email our list. Maybe we email our list twice, but you need more than that. The good news is these two channels, social and email, actually are two of the most effective channels for driving webinar registrations, but it's about thinking about these channels in a new way and finding some ways to maybe add a little bit more budget to it, but also some growth hacky ways that you can use even on a tight budget to get more out of these two channels. So most folks listening to this are probably in B2B, so LinkedIn's probably your primary social channel, so we'll focus on that. So instead of just posting on your company page about the webinar, here's a few things you can do. Create assets and write copy for multiple team members, your executives, your subject matter experts who are speaking on the webinar, and have them post about the webinar on their LinkedIn profiles. And so now you go from, okay, we have one post to, if we have 5 people, automatically there's 5. If we have 2 posts across 5 profiles, now we have 10, and it starts to get exponential from there. what I like to do as well is put out all those organic posts and see which one gained the most traction. Maybe one of your SMEs who's speaking has the biggest and the most relevant audience, and they drove the most engagement with their post. Or maybe your CEO does because they're a bit of an industry thought leader. What you can now do on LinkedIn is you can boost those posts just like you would a company post as a LinkedIn ad. So this is what is called a LinkedIn thought leader ad. And what's nice is you can test and see what performed the best organically, and then pick that as opposed to having to test 3 or 4 different iterations of your ad and spend more on testing than you do on actual performance to get people registered for your webinar. And so I have one client who we looked at their retro after their first webinar, and they were like, the CPLs, or the cost per lead, on this LinkedIn ad campaign through these thought leader ads is the lowest we've ever seen, by a multiple of like 5x. And so that's a way that you can increase your chances or your at-bats for organic social, but then you can have organic social help your paid social be more effective without a huge budget. The other thing we do with a lot of our clients is, whether they're going to live stream to LinkedIn or not, LinkedIn allows you to create an event on your company page that you can tie to your webinar. And this is something that my buddy Justin Rowe, who runs a great LinkedIn ads agency called Impactable, he showed me that I didn't even realize. We've all probably seen a LinkedIn event. And if you go to the page and you register, like, you probably seen where you can hit share and it lets you like post it to your feed, or copy the link and email it to someone, or send it in a DM, and all of those are good. But there's this sneaky additional option that I didn't even know was there, and it's only there for a select few people. Ben, if you and I were hosting a webinar and we were both speakers, when you set up the event on LinkedIn, you have the option to add speakers to the event. When you do that, you and I would have an extra option under that share button that says invite. And when you click that button, this new little window appears that allows you to select people, as well as filter them in mass based on like geography and industry, and send invites to your event on LinkedIn to the tune of 1,000 per week. So these don't count against your like connection request, but they work very much like a connection request. It's an event invitation, and it shows a little X and a check. And LinkedIn actually tracks who you've sent them to and who you haven't. So if you're promoting a webinar for 3 weeks, you can go in, invite 1,000 of your first degree connections, and then wait a week. When your event invite quota resets, you can send another 1,000, and you don't have to worry about spamming the same people. So those are just a few of the ways that we've seen you can get more out of social. Email, I have a few more ideas there, but I've been rambling long enough. You might have some questions about some of those tactics on LinkedIn, or thoughts yourself.
So sounds like multiple people at the company post. You find the winner. You put budget on a thought leader ad. And then that thought leader ad is going to the landing page, or is it going to some event within LinkedIn? Or
Great question.
Yeah.
Ideally, you want to, whenever you can, you want to have people go to the landing page, because the landing page is going to be optimized with the 2-step sign-up process and the lead survey that happens right after registration. If you point people to the event page, they're going to register on LinkedIn. And what we typically do for our clients is we tie that in together with either Zoom or Riverside or whatever webinar platform you're using to automate, so that they get the calendar invite, which drastically affects your attendance rate. But they're not going to get the full experience of that 2-step sign-up process. So if you're driving people somewhere and you have the choice, like these posts on LinkedIn and the thought leader ads, you want to direct them to the landing page. Pro tip on this, a lot of folks listening to this might know this already. When you're posting on LinkedIn and you're promoting some sort of content that's off LinkedIn, it's generally best practice and can keep LinkedIn from throttling your reach, is you don't want to put a link to that asset in the post. You want to usually like put it in the first comment. Well, once you find the winner and you're promoting that originally organic post as a thought leader ad, you're now paying for the distribution. So you don't have to worry about that anymore. So here's what you can do. You can actually edit the post after you've given it a few days and it kind of plateaus off organically in the algorithm. Before you boost it, and change the CTA at the end of your post to say like, hey, join Ben and I on the webinar next week, grab the link in the comments. Delete that line and just say, if you want to join us, register here, and put the link in the post. Now, when you boost it as a thought leader ad, it's now optimized for conversion because you don't have to worry about that hurting your reach because you're now paying for the reach as an ad, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Makes a lot of sense. I got it. I've heard that before, and I never thought to go back. And since the algorithm has already done its thing, you are now not hurting the algorithm, so you can go in and put it in. That's very interesting.
Yeah, I flopped on this the first time I tried thought leader ads for a webinar, and I was like, oh, this doesn't work. And I actually saw a post from my friend Justin that I mentioned earlier, and I was like, oh, this seems so simple. I should have thought of that. And so it works a lot more effectively.
Yeah, JD Garcia from his agency was on the podcast a few months ago as well. And that's also the thing about marketing. Like marketing, when you find a winning funnel, winning ad creative, winning offer, winning process, it's pretty freaking simple, right? The issue in marketing, I think the issue with anything in life is really not like the thing that's working. It's actually just how did you figure out the thing that worked in the first place? And I think that's where it's like so counterintuitively challenging. It's like when we see someone like Alex Hormozi go make $100 million from a launch, and he literally tells you what he did. He did it like he recorded the whole thing. It's like, I did this and I promoted this way, but there's so many subtle decisions across that. And I'm not trying to scare people from trying. I'm just saying that having been a marketer now for over a decade, it seems so easy. I was like, oh, ClickFunnels back in the day. I was like, ClickFunnels. Before ClickFunnels, there was a couple other like WordPress plugins that I would use.
Yeah.
This is like 2013. And I remember just being like, this is so easy, landing page to this offer, and I'll just spend some money. And God, that I was so naive. It's just, there's so many little things where you're like, well, it's not working. And like, for example, I ran some ads the other day, generated 200 leads. We got them, cost per lead was $10, seemed great. Horrible quality. Just like, I mean, they would get on the call and it would be like a toothless person from like Missouri. No offense to toothless people or Missouri, but it was like people were just like completely like, I'm on my last paycheck. I'll never be able to buy your thing, but I liked your ad. I wanted to talk to you. And so, there's this constant iterative approach to find out what works. And I think that's where actually most of the pain comes from, is that iteration. So, okay, so we've covered the landing page. We've covered the how do you get people there from the cold ads. Are you ever doing Facebook or Meta or other channels, or is it mostly LinkedIn on the paid ad side?
It's mostly LinkedIn right now, although I do want to start testing Meta because I've seen some folks drive a lot there to webinars, but that's been mostly more on kind of the B2C side. However, I think that there is possibility there. I just haven't tried that yet. One thing I will say, though, actually two things. I mentioned getting more out of social, which we covered, and getting more out of email. Actually, three things when it comes to email that you're probably not doing right now. The first really surprised me, and I actually had someone who's not a client, but another marketing agency saw me post about this email growth hack, and they tried it and they were like, wow, this drove 40% of our latest webinar, and it was so easy to set up. And it's actually about using Eventbrite to promote your webinars. And most people in B2B hear Eventbrite and they're like, that's like meetup.com, like it's for local stuff, for concerts or whatever. Well, what I found is that Eventbrite not only lets you list your webinar as an event, so kind of giving it another place to put a billboard out for your webinar, like the LinkedIn event, but people aren't just going to find that organically. But what I found is that Eventbrite also has an email marketing service that you can sign up for to the tune of like $20 to $50 a month that allows you to import maybe cold lists of targeted folks from like an Apollo or Zoom Info or some sort of data provider there, where you're not going to just, hopefully not, just take those cold lists and suck them into your ActiveCampaign or HubSpot or, Marketo and just start blasting those people. But via Eventbrite, you can promote that event to that cold audience. And these email campaigns have been really effective. I just had a client who we did a webinar earlier today, and about a third of their webinar signups came from this method. So pairing Eventbrite listing with their email campaigns to protect your domain and allow the people who then sign up, now they are on your list. So now next time, like you can remarket to them and you can email your list, but this gets away from that just like hitting your same list all the time to promote your webinar. The second thing is leveraging what I like to call OPLs, other people's lists. So do you have partners? Do you have complementary folks in your space? Like, we both mentioned Impactable, other agencies other than what we do that are complementary. Hey, I'm running this webinar. Could you do a send to your list? Chris Dubois is an agency coach that I'm pretty close with. And anytime I'm doing a webinar that's applicable for agencies, I say, hey, can you include this in your newsletter? He's like, sure. And if he has something, I can do the same. There's also pay to play options. No matter what your industry, whether you sell to a vertical market or horizontal market, there are probably newsletters out there that sell ads that you could stand out from the other advertisers that are buying space in those newsletters by giving them a content offer of a webinar rather than just sending a direct response sort of ad to your homepage. And if you're doing the two-step sign-up process, you're okay with that because you're not just getting, MQLs, you might be getting SQLs at the same time, right? And then the third thing I would say is look at your SDR or BDR team, or if you have someone doing outbound for you, can you take a portion of the outbound that they're doing and do a kind of a softer sell and say, hey, would you be interested in this webinar? Where this is why I think it would be applicable for you, and see if you can get more people in the door there. Because if you're doing that sort of outreach via LinkedIn DMs or email, it's a little bit, it's a little more palatable for folks because it's like, hey, Ben, we're running a webinar next Wednesday. I think it's relevant for you, but it's also time bound, right? I'm not just saying, hey, do you want my ebook? Do you want my evergreen piece of content? Because I think it's, relevant to you, but it's actually relevant and potentially timely. So I think it's a little more palatable, which is why we see, sometimes some good success with that. Varies by market, by offer, by client, and by audience. But those are three ways you could get more out of email than what you're probably doing now.
I'm curious, what is it about the Eventbrite email promotion that is so different than just, let's say that you spun up a bunch of domains and you did a cold email to them. Mm-hmm. Is it because there's a brand around Eventbrite and people recognize that brand and they're opting into something that has some kind of brand authority there? Or what do you think it is?
That's my best guess, because we've tested out a bunch of subject lines, and what we will actually often do is put some sort of emoji at the beginning, and in brackets put Eventbrite invite, and then put the subject line, which we've seen some success with, like shorter subject lines that are kind of more value driven, or just the name of the webinar. If you've done a good job and you've written your webinar title like you would like a YouTube video title, which is a kind of something that we've seen much more success with. But having that Eventbrite piece, I think, is borrowing a little bit of credibility of, hey, I'm getting something at least associated or listed somewhere where that's what they do. They allow you to find out about events, both in person and virtual, that you might be interested in. And then in the email, it kind of, if you do it right, you can have this little block that shows your event. And instead of just your landing page, it's kind of got the Eventbrite branding of like, hey, this is something that's available on Eventbrite. And now they've even changed it to where you can, basically when you sign up for an Eventbrite event, you basically buy a ticket, but you can set them to free. And they now have different ways you can label that button: RSVP, buy a ticket. And what I like for webinars is just hit register. And then what I'm usually doing is using an automation tool like Zapier to then, again, if they buy a ticket or register on Eventbrite, push them into High Level, which I use as my CRM and marketing automation software, push them into Riverside if that's where I'm hosting the webinar, that sort of thing. So that way you can kind of make it look like a safe option. Not that it's not a safe option, but if, again, when you're reaching out to people cold, there's a little bit of that, trust gap that you need to step over. And I think you're exactly right. This allows you to get across that bridge more often than you would otherwise.
Very interesting. Yeah, I think it's subtle trust cues like that go so far.
It goes back to what you were saying earlier. It's kind of like, the devil is in the details with a lot of these things, right? And I tried to figure out a way when I was first doing the two-step sign-up process, for instance, to just do that on HubSpot, because I saw HubSpot, had progressive forms, but I couldn't create easily a way to separate the first registration form from the survey in the second step. So then I started, if I'm using HubSpot, I use Unbounce for my landing page, Typeform for the survey, and then HubSpot for the calendar piece. So if you're on HubSpot and you're listening to this, like, that's a way to fast track like a chain of tech or a tech stack, if you will, that I know works with this sort of situation. What I've done is I found that High Level has a landing page tool, a form tool, a survey designer, calendars built right in, and obviously it's the CRM in the background. And so for me and for a lot of my clients, that's been the tech stack of choice, because it's not even a stack, it's just one tool, and very cost effective if you're on a budget as well.
Yeah, it's interesting because for me, I've used Go High Level. I have a bias against Go High Level because I think its outbound capabilities for a sales team are kind of suck compared to, I think it's great for automation. I think it's great for what you're describing. Like there's chatbots and there's landing pages. It's kind of it's a better marketing tool in my opinion.
Yeah.
But for
great
me,
funnel
like
builder,
B2B,
right? Like I've had people be like, oh, you must be a big Russell Brunson fan. And I was like, no, I just found a funnel that works. And I've found a tech stack that kind of enables it. So
yeah. So I could almost imagine using Go High Level for like that side of it. And then for me, I love Close CRM because it's great for outbound. It's just such a simple CRM for BDR teams and like cold calling teams. Right. But it's this constant debate, which is like just in what tech stack do you use? I mean, my software ReviOps, the entire software is built literally to solve that problem. It's, hey, you have instantly point solution, HeyReach, LinkedIn solution, and then you also have Go High Level, and you have Clay, and you have Apollo, and da-da-da-da-da. And so what ReviOps does is pull it all together, merge it, normalize it. But it's still a question, like, I think that my belief is there's no system that fully can do everything. Now, maybe AI solves this. Maybe there's just one interface where it's just so smart and it just goes and like, boom, builds landing page for like this very particular thing. In live time, it like A/B tests and then like does run tests and then changes it without you even thinking about it. And then at any point you could say, tell me the winner. And it goes, here's our current winner. We'll let you know in 5,000 impressions.
And if it hits this, then kill the B test and lead with that as the winner. And, maybe people are doing that with Claude Code now, or we're getting there. I was just attending a webinar the other day on setting up your instance of Claude Code with Cursor and building kind of your first AI agent to run locally and do a lot of this stuff. So I'm going to be testing to see, because even with High Level, there is a lot of, like, it's so built for this, but there's a lot of meticulous stuff that you've got to get right, especially because for my clients, I'm not a fan of just like, oh, let's just have one webinar and let's just rinse and repeat. It's a new topic. It's timely every month as we're running webinars, because I think from the brand building side and the education side, that's what you need to do. Tie that with a more effective funnel, and that's how you get lead gen while you're doing brand building. But that means, okay, I got to update this funnel. I've got to, change the redirect. Am I using a different survey? All that sort of stuff. So if I could train an AI agent to, to do a lot of that clicking for me and Go High Level, I'm going to be all about that soon.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I would admit that like we just integrated Claude into my software today.
Oh, cool.
And so now you can actually go do a bunch of that stuff. But I'm super curious, like, because with ClaudeBot and Claude in general, and then now you have Codex and OpenAI, and you have Cursor. Man, it's like it's taken the world by storm in the last 3 months. And look, people have been talking about it for a year, and people have been kind of dabbling in it,
right.
I think, on the edges for about 6 months. But I think it just blew up 60 to 90 days ago, and I think it's just on this hype train. So I'm trying, like, I'm in this very weird place where on one hand I have a deep bias against over automating the marketing, but I've been talking to some people in my network and they're like, dude, I'm doing crazy things with Claude. And I'm like, what are you doing crazy? Like, what? Tell me what it is, because it's like all I hear is it's so amazing, I just automated this. And I just always want to know, but what specifically? Like, what did you do? So I'm going to try to learn it too. I will admit I'm I would call it not a laggard. I'm certainly like on the cutting edge, but I am like not a early evangelist. I am like right a step behind it. Like, I'll let you guys like hype this up, and then I'll see kind of where the dust settles.
I hear you. I'm similar. I probably have 5 or 6 DMs in my LinkedIn inbox starred because I saw people putting out a like guide to Claude skills or this Clay automation or whatever, and I'm like, okay, I'll buy it. I'll comment, but they're all kind of sitting there for me to go back and review. Of the ones that actually sent, because we know a lot of that like comment gating on LinkedIn, people don't actually send you the lead magnet or resource or whatever, but a lot have, but I haven't had the chance to really dig into them and see what's what and what's hype versus what's reality, to borrow what you were saying there.
It seems to me like we're clearly in a hype cycle. The question, and I was talking to somebody earlier about this, is like, are we in a hype cycle that is realistic? Meaning, like, is the hype justified?
Right.
And I don't know. There's a couple of things that cause me to believe it's not. One is, I'm talking about for GTM, lead generation.
Right.
Is that, like, fundamentally, it's the whole reason I'm investing in RevOps, if I couldn't be more clear on my bet, is that context windows matter. And there's like there's a limited context window in Claude or any of these tools. And it can only make decisions based upon the context it has access to, obviously. But the truth is that when you're making context decisions across an entire sales and marketing organization, you need to know the context for probably at least a year of the entire org to know, like, who did we hit in the last year? What conversations occurred? Where were they in the deal cycles? Like, why did they respond that way? What tests occurred across multiple channels, right? You had, like, for example, the stuff in Go High Level, then you might have some stuff otherwise. So there's no way the AI can not only have access to all of that and then digest it to then give you the best result. It's basically saying, let me connect to these 4 tools right now. Let me take the most limited version of reality for, say, the last 6 campaigns, and I'm going to give you an output that I think is reasonable.
I think you're onto something here, and that ability and that expansion to handle more context is probably where this where we're at right now is going to go one way or the other. Because I was listening to a YouTube video the other day that was literally all about this of Claude at the time of this recording. I think it's Opus 4.6 is their most advanced model there within Claude, and the amount of context that it can hold is vastly increased from just 2-3 months ago, to your point about kind of the last 90-day hype train. So is that real? Does it really work for GTM? Is that going to continue to expand? Is the ability to not only hold that but use that effectively going to work? Because that's exactly what I'm hearing a lot of people in my network talk about is it's no longer about prompting, it's about giving the right context to these LLMs so that they have the right context to make the decisions, right? Because that is one thing that AI can do, is not just follow a set automation workflow, which has been the problem with over automating things in B2B. I would completely agree with you there. So I do think a lot of it hinges around this context. I'm no AI expert, so I don't know if I'm using the right terms, but their ability to handle and utilize the context that you get it and the amount that it needs to be effective.
Yeah, I mean, and then I think related to that, So it's like, one is just like, does it have access to things, right? So let's say you have, again, just use Clay and Apollo and Wizza and HubSpot and whatever, and you're pulling data from all these tools. That's like one thing, like that's a piece of context. But then there's a secondary piece of context that is like, how does the AI know to merge and deduplicate on certain identifiers, right? So now maybe it does say, okay, we're using email and LinkedIn and phone and email, et cetera. And it is automatically merging them into some place, but it still has to, like, unless there's some fundamentally different way of storing data that I'm not yet seeing, and probably some AI expert could explain this to me better. But right now, structured databases, non-structured databases, columnar databases, there's still like fundamental physics of database technology. Now that said, the AI is holding in its context window, like say a whole code base, which could be a couple 100,000 lines of code. So it obviously has some way to store some memory. The question I have is, can it store as much memory as is required across all these tools to actually be smart enough to make the decision today that is right, but also in 3 days from now and say 7 months from now? Because it has to remember the context of what it did before. And maybe the answer is yes. I mean, if it is, then I
agree with you. This is a lot of where it's going to rise or fall.
Yeah, it's interesting. So I know we only have 6 minutes left. You gave us a masterclass in webinars. We never got to talk about what is actually on the webinar. Are you a fan of like the Russell Brunson, like I asked you, you said before, the what's it called? The
video sales letter?
No, he has this thing called the like perfect webinar.
Oh yeah. I to be frank, I haven't even really, delved too much into that format. Like what I have done is basically try to create this blend of education and conversion, because in B2B, we've seen all the studies, 95% of our TAM at any given point is not in market for our solution, right? 5% is. And so as the old Irish proverb goes, for every mile of road, there's 2 miles of ditch, meaning there's 2 mistakes you can make at any given time, no matter where you're at on your journey. And I think one ditch is burning the bridge with the 95%, just pitching them, your webinar is way too salesy, it's way too on the nose. There's no education. There's no, as Alex Hormozy often says, like there's no trust building where you're solving small problems for them. You're just trying to solve the big problem that your product or service does. But then the other ditch is you're missing the 5%, which is what I was doing, contributing to that conversion cliff by going so heavy on the education that you don't have a path for those 5% to take the next step. And that's where the 2-step sign-up process helps. And then the other thing that I found that we actually, we out of probably only 40 to 50 live attendees, we booked 6 sales calls from live attendees with a client of ours earlier today. We took the CTA after like 45 minutes of educating. Instead of burying the CTA at the end of an hour-long webinar, we just moved it up a little bit before the Q&A so that we still had everybody's attention. We also made the offer, we added some exclusivity to it. So instead of just offering a sales call, we said, hey, the topic of this webinar was AI visibility and this whole GEO or AEO area. My client, Will Rico at Common Minds, offers services there. They used to be kind of a strictly SEO shop. Now they're evolving with the state of search. Instead of just saying, hey, book a call with Will and see if they can help you with your SEO and GEO problems, we said, hey, if you book a call today, we'll give you a free AI visibility snapshot for your brand. And it'll include X, Y, and Z. And we also made it a little bit exclusive, and we put a survey in front of that and said, see if you qualify for a free AI visibility snapshot. And so there was a little bit of FOMO. There was a little bit of the psychology of like, see if you qualify. That also allowed us to see, hey, if we get quote unquote bad fit leads that are showing up to the webinar and we put the CTA in front of everybody, how do we make sure we get someone who is a good fit for us? Again, no offense to the bad fit folks, but we're in business. We're trying to reach the right people at the right time. And so that balance of education and conversion, just optimizing it more, in these 2 conversion points. Now, we still do the follow-up. We still do that segmented, prioritized follow-up. And what I said earlier, probably 45 minutes ago, is still true. You can do better follow-up based on the survey data. But I still see that as the lowest converting touch point in this whole webinar funnel. 90% of the conversions that are happening for DemandShift clients are happening upon registration with the 2-step sign-up process, or during the live show with that exclusive qualification value-added offer of some kind.
And when you make the offer, is it a link, or do they sign up for something, or like what is the offer? Like, where does it, when you make the offer, are you saying I'm dropping it in the chat now, or is it like, how does that work?
I'm always a big fan of yes and. So it's usually 2 ways. It's a link in the chat, and that's either straight to a booking page, or if you want to put a qualification survey in front of it, like I was just saying, it could be a 1 or a 2-step process from that link. And then what I do is create a QR code that goes to that same landing page and put that up huge, covering half the screen, and say, if you want to take advantage of this, scan the QR code before we move on to the next slide. So then there's also a little bit of urgency to it, of kind of act now. But I've literally had some people of like, I can't scan a QR code. And then I ran some tests and saw that 2/3 of people, when we did the QR code, scanned that versus clicking the link. So in my mind, I was like, I'm not going to choose between these. I'm just going to optimize for as many conversion paths as people want and need to have.
That makes sense. And then when people land, is it going straight to the survey questions again? Is it the same exact survey questions that were on the lander, or is it?
Oftentimes it different? Can be. Yeah, it's that simple. But instead of like the first question, like the preview text above the first question, be like, normally when it's during the sign up process, the language will be complete your free webinar registration by answering a few questions, and then question 1. In this case, I just have a different version of the landing page in the survey that says, see if you qualify for X offer by answering a few questions. And then you take them through the same ones.
Fascinating. Great. Well, it was great to have you on. We're obviously going to have to potentially do another one to go deeper into, what goes into the content of the webinar. But where can people find you online?
Absolutely. So I'll say 3 places. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty easy to find there. My last name is Lyles, Lyles. If you want to check out what we're doing at DemandShift, it's just demandshift.co. But I also encourage you guys, if you want to see webinars done well that are of value to B2B marketers, especially, you can go to demandshift.co/signup, and you can get on our email list, and all of the webinars and live streams that we're doing there on a variety of B2B marketing topics, you'll get access to, because we're usually hosting 2 to 5 shows per month on a variety of B2B marketing topics.
Great. And then I have a quick question just for people who are thinking about this. Who's an ideal fit for you? So is there a certain average order value? Is there a certain, I know you mentioned software before, but like, who would this work for and who would this not work for? I guess we should just say, so anybody who's thinking about contacting you.
Yeah. So I would say exclusively B2B companies. So at DemandShift, we don't work with any folks that are B2C. Within that, a higher ACV tends to, the economics of it work a little bit better based on, what our typical monthly retainer is for the full done for you webinar service. And then I would say third, who really are the best fit clients for us, if you kind of fit those first 2 and you sell to GTM professionals, whether that's agency side marketers, in-house marketers, or sales leaders, we not only have this framework and a done for you service that installs the framework for you, but we have a built-in audience of my 20,000 LinkedIn followers and our email list that's continuing to grow at about 5,000 right now, plus some industry partnerships with newsletters that are full of marketers and agency folks. That's where it really gets fun, because we're able to not only apply this framework, but apply it where we've got some built-in audience, which is always a fun combination to have.
What would you say in terms of average order value, what would be the minimum that you've seen work? Yeah,
I would say probably an ACV of at least 5,000 and up from there. And as it goes up in higher consideration purchase, we can really have a sweet spot. Some of my agency clients, they have kind of similar starting retainer to as what we have at DemandShift, where it's 5 to 6K, per month, that sort. And so they don't need a whole lot to break even, right? They might only need, a few new closed deals, but I would say that's kind of the starting threshold. There's options within there.
Do you find that the lead cost per acquiring the clients on the webinars tends to be in a certain range? Is it typically
I wish I had data on that just yet. I am kind of a brand marketer turning into a demand gen marketer. And so I've got some better data on sources, on attendance rates, on conversion rates, those sorts of things. But I haven't drilled down to, exact CPL averages among clients. But now we've got about 8 months of data for the client webinars we've been running that we're not too far off from being able to crunch that with some statistically significant data to it.
Very, very interesting. Great. Well, thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
All right. Well, great. Well, last question. I always ask this at the end. If you have to leave the audience with one final piece of advice, it does not have to be business advice. It could be life advice. The number one lesson you've learned in your life, the number one thing you would want to leave if you were going to another solar system and you weren't coming back, what would you want to leave behind?
So this is the salesperson in me, because like I said, my career is nearly 20 years at this point, and I've been on the sales side of the fence as much as I have been on the marketing side. And one thing that I wish more marketers understood that a lot of salespeople do inherently is that your network is your net worth. When I launched DemandShift and I did starting a new position post as founder of DemandShift, so many people came out of the woodwork wanting to support my LinkedIn posts because I had added value to them one-on-one or through my content on LinkedIn. And also people that just knew, liked, and trusted me to go back to how to win friends and influence people, which is, something that sales and marketing professionals should definitely read. An oldie but a goodie, I would say. Became some of my first clients. And so invest in your network, both at the macro and at the micro, because it will pay dividends to your GTM efforts.
Very cool. All right. Well, thanks for being on. Anybody who wants to learn more, there's some show notes and links down there. Obviously go, if you're running webinars, get in touch. Otherwise, this has been another episode of the Next Gen Sales Leader Podcast. I'll see you guys on the next one. Signing out.